Welcome back to Leading Women in Tech. I'm your host, Toni Collis, and today we're talking to the co-founder of Talent Build Ventures, Erica Carter. Erica is passionate about building strong, engaged teams, and she does this through this company, Talent Build Ventures, which is focused on how we tackle employing people the right way. Now, we're going to talk about being unemployed and how, as individuals, you can make the most of unemployment, what you need to be evaluating at the point of unemployment. But everything we're talking about here is really about creating a direction of travel in your career that can facilitate your career journey for the best possible reasons. We talk about what you need to consider when you're unemployed. We talk about how outplacement services are quite often a bit archaic. So if you've received something from your workplace, why it might not be working, what you might need to consider in terms of additional support. We didn't actually call that out explicitly, but I think when she talks about why she thinks some of these outplacement services are archaic, that might give you an idea of the support that you're missing that might actually help you get to the right place faster. So without further ado, let's get Erica onto the show. Welcome to the show, Erica. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, let's start off with your career journey, your highlights, those very important lowlights that I like to ask everybody about, and how you came to be a co-founder of Talent Build Ventures.
Sure. So I started my HR journey about 10 years ago. Prior to that, I worked in the hospital world. So when I transitioned over, I made the decision that I was going to ensure that I made not only the best decision for the company, but the best decision for the employee as I was going along. When I had my second child and I was on maternity leave, and I think a little bit of postpartum depression was in there as well. I was on LinkedIn almost all day long because what else are you going to do while you're feeding a baby? And I noticed that every one of my colleagues in the industry had been let go. HR had taken a big hit. And it's really when the idea of Talent Build Ventures came about. What we are essentially doing is we are a VC for HR ideas. And recently we launched, I think, one of my favorite ones to date, which is Origami Outplacement, and that focuses on helping individuals who have just been let go really navigate the unemployment world. We provide mental health counselors, and we ensure that they are really in the best state of mind when they're looking for their next job, as we also try to help them to find their next role as well. And this is usually a benefit that's given by an employer. And it all just stemmed from seeing people being let go, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we were speaking before we hit record, the thing that really struck me is you are unusual, in my experience, of people, the individual being at the heart of what you do rather than the company. Now, I spend a lot of time talking to executives saying you have to put the business first. That's the job. And I think people understand why, and that if you don't have a business, you can't do payroll, you have to let people go. So you do have to put company first, put people first. But you've got a unique take on this, which I love. Why did you come to that? Like, how did you come to that? How do you make this a viable business? Give us the insight here.
Sure. So being in HR, we do layoffs a lot, unfortunately. And we are the ones who not only have to do the layoffs, but we also usually try to figure out like what benefits we can give as part of the severance package. And outplacement services are not new to the industry. They've been around for at least 20 to 30 years, but they're archaic. They give you just a little bit of coaching, maybe a career platform. They really do not try to help you find a role. And that's where we kind of saw us as just being different in the industry. Like, yes, you do need to put a business first, but in putting a business first and protecting your market brand or your brand market, I'm not really sure how you exactly say it, but To do that, you also have to think about exits and how you're handling exits and ensuring that you're handling them with grace. And that's where we really come in because there are a lot of organizations that do not know how to let go of people.
Hmm.
And then they have no clue on what type of benefits can be even offered or how to really navigate that next phase of someone's life and career.
Hmm.
And that's where we're trying to come in. We're trying to be that stepping stone for a company to say, hey, we had a bad profit season, or we had a period of time where we realized we hired too much and now we have too many
Mm.
employees. And what do we do? And that's where we're here to pretty much work with organizations to say, hey, like, we know how much your people mattered to you. Now let's
Mhm.
do right by them and offer them a service where, they can actually gracefully exit the company and feel that you still cared about them. And I think that's the big turning point there. It's you're still caring. You're still being focused on your people-centric environment and not forgetting that when it comes to the end of a relationship. Like, no one likes bad breakups. You don't want, the TikTok videos and the Instagram stories flying out there about how poorly the outplacement process was or the exit process was. And I think that that's where we kind of come in and offering individuals mental health support, navigating unemployment. There are so many benefits that come with being unemployed where you can actually figure out what you really want to do next. But if you don't know those options are out there for you, you'll never take advantage of it. And a big part in the US, especially, is healthcare. Everyone freaks out. You get laid off. I have to take Cobra. It's so expensive. What do I do? There's a marketplace if you know how to navigate it. And we're here to kind of walk people through on how to navigate marketplace and how to choose a plan while you're in this in-between phase that's going to work for you and your family, because Cobra's not always the best option.
Mhm.
But we believe that's our only option because we're not taught or educated.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it strikes me as really fascinating that, I work with people in tech, across tech, and these are people who, in many respects, are some of the most informed people on the planet because of our jobs, and yet we don't know this stuff. Let me just take you back. I want to deal a little bit more about how we can navigate unemployment better. And also, I know you've got a passion for getting people into positions irrespective of their employment status. But I want to just take us back a moment to this poor outplacement process that, you mentioned it was archaic, and you mentioned they offer a bit of coaching and a bit of this and a bit of that. And one thing you've mentioned there that you do is more for mental health support, but what else is wrong? Getting a little bit of coaching. I've had people come to me and go, oh, I've got outplacement coaching. I don't need your support in getting a job. And then they come back to me 6 months later. I didn't get a job. What is going on with these services? Why are they not working? Why are you calling them archaic?
So how they work is sometimes you do get a coach depending on the service, or sometimes you're just put through a course. But what the course doesn't necessarily teach you is how to build a resume that's going to get through the system nowadays. And a lot of it is how many times you've sent out your resume, how you network is a big piece of it. And unless you are a network guru, learning how to network is really learning how to cook. It is a
Yes.
fully new task that you're
Yeah.
taking on. You're not going to be great at it. There's a lot of ego that gets in the way of, like, I'm reaching out and I'm telling people that I'm unemployed and being vulnerable and how to accept that vulnerability. And those are the things that outplacement services right now, a lot of them don't really go into. They don't really talk about that. They might give you like a course that you can go through about, like, how do you set up a networking campaign?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have someone that you're also speaking to. And so our packages gives you a mixture of a career platform where you can take different courses, a lot related to how to find your next job. But then you have someone that you're also speaking to that's saying, hey, like, did you start making a list of like 25 people you can reach out to? What are the companies that you really have seen in the market that you've been interested in and you want to learn more about? And how do you start those conversations? Because like LinkedIn right now, I feel is getting flooded with people where you don't know somebody and you're reaching out and you're like, hey, I really want to learn about your company. That's great. But you know what's even better is if you can figure out somebody who you know in between that
Who
can
can
make that
introduce
connection
you?
for you.
Yes,
And that's really
huge.
going to be the big change
Yeah.
maker. And it's also a big part of it. I think we fall into careers not necessarily realizing what our journey is going to be. And we get very stuck in this is all I can do. Instead of actually thinking through what are other things that I could potentially leverage with the skills that I have to really create the next stage of my life. And that's where I think people look at unemployment as this negative stage of potentially your life where it doesn't have to be. This is your opportunity to try something new. This is your opportunity to learn a new skill. This is an opportunity to see the skills that you have and say, how can I figure out how I can relate this to another job? And how do I then not only apply for that job, but how do I network with the people at that organization to show them that I am capable of doing that job? And that is a big piece of it. Like people are like, well, you know, I can't change industries or I can't change. I'm an operations person. I could never be a finance person. You could. You might start out a little bit lower level.
Not always, though, in
But
my
not
experience.
always. Not always.
Yeah.
You might. Or you might start off at a lateral level. Or sometimes you might step into a higher position because they need to take skills that you have that their finance group does not have in order to make a more robust offering for that company. There's just so many ways of going about it. And I think people just get very, very stuck in the minutia of, I just got laid off. I'm not capable of doing the work that I did. My last company didn't value me. Instead of just realizing it was a business decision. It doesn't mean you were bad at your job. And it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the job you need to do moving forth either. Like, you need to be able to recognize when things were not working well for you and what did you learn from that experience and what can you take from that experience to your next one.
Yeah. Okay, I want to just rewind us a second and talk about this, you know, using your unemployment to see opportunities. Because one thing that's really striking me here is there's a lot going on during this period of unemployment that many of us freak out about. We're like, how am I going to pay the bills? The most optimistic I see, which is still not very optimistic, I have a number of people come to me. They've had 6 or 12 months off because of burnout. They've decided to take a package or something else. Maybe they got laid off and just said, right, I'm not going to get hired straight away because I am burnt out. I need time. And that's given them time. But the way you're talking is there's actually stuff to do when we're unemployed, which isn't just freak out about landing a job or recover from burnout. And I just wish that nobody needed to recover from burnout. What's going on during this period of unemployment? How can we use this in the best possible way for our future?
Yeah. So I think that anyone, whether you are burnt out or you're scrambling because you're like, how am I going to pay the bills for next week? I think everyone needs to take at least a few days to kind of look back and say what worked for them and what didn't work for them and what were their non-negotiables for their next role. Because a lot of times, even if you get burned out and you need that break, you go back into that same cyclical environment that was not good for you in the first place.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to really have that self-awareness of who you are as a person and the things that you really need. We only live once. That's it. After you're off this planet, you're done. And money is important. And I agree with that. You need money to, you know, get the bottom level of the Maslow's higher or pyramid.
Hmm.
Uh, but you also need to be true to yourself, and certain careers are not, even if they pay you millions of dollars, are not worth it at the end of the day, because your life, your health, your family, those things only come once, and you have to cherish what's important. And
Hmm.
so anyone who is just entering the unemployment arena, even if you can only take 1 or 2 days, take a day of self-reflection
Hmm.
and really start to think through what worked and what didn't. Because you need to identify those red flags for when you start looking for your next employer. Because you don't want to go into that cycle again, because you're going to get burned out again. And guess what?
Hmm.
You might not get unemployed, but you might quit. And then you might be in the same position trying to figure out, what am I going to do next?
Hmm.
And I think that if you can take that period to just set expectations with yourself on who you are, who you want to be, it's going to help you make the right next career decision and not make a hasty one because you're worried about paying the bills. And I do understand how important that piece is as well.
100%. I mean, I hear tears so often from people who are like, I just need to pay the bills, and I get it. If we could just slow down a couple of days, as you say, you can make a decision that's going to support you so you're not back here in 12 months' time. Because I think one of the things I notice is I support people sometimes over years. And when somebody's come to me and then their role that is just not aligned, they are far more likely to burn out. They're far more likely, well, because stress causes burnout, right? And if you're not aligned, you're going to get burnt out. They're far more likely to burn out. They're far more likely to be let go because they're not thriving. And that's when you've got somebody who's not thriving, you're trying to decide, I've got 10 people, I need to let go of 3. You're going to choose the people who aren't thriving because they're just not gelling with the team. They're not turning up to work happy. They're harder to work with. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
bad thing. It's just a reflection on the reality of you're not happy means that you are more likely to be let go. And I think slowing down right now so that you aren't back here in 12 months' time is the biggest investment we can make for ourselves, right?
I agree.
Yeah. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about being your passion for getting people into the right positions, which kind of we've
Mm-hmm.
touched on this already. And unemployment is one opportunity to kind of like rethink this. But I know you don't just do it at the point when somebody's unemployed, you do it at any point in somebody's career. Where does this particular passion come from for you? Because it's more than just like it's a nice idea. There's clearly something deeper here.
Yeah, so I would say for me, the reason that HR is a pretty large industry. There's lots of pieces, which I don't know if everyone realizes. There's insurance, there's compensation, there's general HR compliance, and there's also recruitment. And part of what I love to do is speak to others about what their career journey has been. But I also like to ensure that when I'm matching somebody with an organization, their values align. Because a lot of
Mm,
times we just take a job and we're like, oh, this sounds like a really cool company. They offer all these really cool benefits, but you don't align with what the company stands for. And then if you aren't aligning with what the company stands for, guess what? You're probably going to have issues with coworkers, with what
hmm.
the company is trying to do at the end of the day, how they approach it, because that all falls in with those values. And yes, there are some companies who have amazing values, and then you go to work for them and you're like, holy cow, what is going on here?
Hmm.
I try not to work with those companies. I try to like suss those companies out.
Hard to suss
And
out
if
there, right? It's really
it
hard to
it
guess.
can
Yeah.
be, I will say, if a company can't tell me what their North Star is
Mm,
or what they're trying to actually reach within the next year, or they can't tell me what the main deliverables will be for that employee that would be coming on for them, that's usually a red flag for me as a recruiter, looking at the industry as a whole to identify someone that could work for that organization and thrive. Because if
mm,
you don't know who you are as a company, guess what? Your employees aren't going to know who they are as employees.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what I like to do as a recruiter is ensure that I know who my candidates are and really get to know them, build that rapport and relationship with them. In that, we do some career coaching. We do really talk about, is this really what you want to do? If I hear somebody and I'm speaking to them and they don't sound passionate about the work they're doing, I always ask them, are you sure you want to be doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a question I will tell you, I've had people be very taken back and be like, of course, this is what I want to do. And that's when I follow up. I really want you to think about, this is your next phase. You are now having the opportunity where you're either looking for a job because you are unemployed and you're coming into our network, or you are employed right now and you're unhappy and you're looking to make a change to another company. Is it the type of work you were doing? Is it the type of company you were working for that you weren't happy with? Was it the hours? Was it the expectations? Was it your ability to give feedback and level set with your own management? What was it? And it's getting down to that nitty-gritty that really helps for us, at least here at Talent Build, to figure out what is your right next journey step and how can we make sure that you're going to be with that company for a year plus. Because there's nothing that we hate more than to place somebody and find out in 3 to 6 months that they're unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
Because then we didn't do our job well either.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so important, and something so overlooked is that anybody who is helping to do placements should be looking at, is this person still going to be here and thriving in 12 months time? And I just don't think there's enough of that in the industry to be caring about. And I think this is why a lot of companies are actually hesitant to hire placement services now, because it's like a 6-month piece. As long as they're here in 6 months time, that's okay. And I don't think that's sufficient. People want people that are going to be around for like 2 or 3 years minimum. I think 2 years is a minimum sweet spot for most companies. Like, that's when you're starting to break even. You're getting, if they're a good fit, they're going to be really delivering and hopefully interested in staying. Do you see this as a problem in the outplacement industry, or do you think I'm making something here up that isn't actually true?
There are a lot of placement services, as in like recruitment agencies, that just funnel through candidates. They find the ones that are the most qualified, but they don't necessarily identify, is this the right person for this company? This is the right criteria for the role. I think what makes our company a little bit different is those organizations that participate in our outplacement services, we do the recruitment side with a different retainer and placement model. Once you're in our outplacement, we will look to see what roles that you have opened. And since we are now creating that relationship with you as an organization, and we get to really know you as an organization, we then look for those that are going through our outplacement services or may come to us organically and say, is this the right person for this company?
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to just push somebody because, like, oh, this person is a unicorn. In my experience, unicorns are not really unicorns.
Oh, yeah.
They're mythical. They are individuals that are usually not a jack of all trades. They have very few niche skills. They've just been in a lot of different areas. So it looks like they have a vast amount of knowledge behind them. But the truth is, they don't necessarily have the knowledge, especially in the tech industry, in the startup tech industry, that you really need. Like, you don't want somebody who knows everything. You want somebody who is really good at one area that is going to hone in on that one area and make your company successful in that area. Not like 10 different areas of marketing or 10 different areas of HR. Like, that is not going to be helpful for you, because those individuals usually had a big team underneath them who was doing the nitty gritty work. And at startups especially, it's a do or die environment. You're executing, you're implementing, and you're building strategy all at the same time.
Yeah.
And you need somebody who's actually executed and built the strategy and implemented and is comfortable doing that even in executive positions at some organizations, because there's just not enough bodies to do it.
Yeah. And I think this is something I want everybody to hear, is that the majority of positions are in smaller companies, right? There are a couple of huge companies out there, but if you actually look at the workforce, the majority of people are employed in smaller companies. And that doesn't mean that you have to be hands on keyboard in the weeds, but you need to be aware of when you're interviewing. And I have this conversation so much with clients with, I don't want a job where I'm hands on keyboard. I'm like, okay, great. That doesn't mean you have to go for these big companies, but you do have to be mindful of what you're interviewing for, because different companies, and it's not even necessarily correlated with size. I see different companies needing a leader to be more hands-on or more hands-off, and you've got to find the right fit. But let me just go back to what we can do as individuals here for our careers. And when we were speaking before, you talked about a couple of pivotal moments that we should be looking out for when we as individuals can kind of see a little bit further ahead because of what's going on. When in our career should we be pausing and slowing down, irrespective of a layoff coming or anything like that? When should we be taking stock of our careers and saying, am I on the right track? Am I following my North Star? Is it time for me to rethink? What should we be looking out for?
So I think, as you mentioned, if you are in this constant state of burnout, where you are just going, and you are just at 100 miles per hour, and you can never get down to 30 to just see the countryside, that's when first you need to take a step back and say, is this what I want? Is this where I'm going in the right direction? Are there things that I need to ask the company I'm currently with for in order for me to not be that doer, that strategist, that implementer, everything? Because I can't keep going at this pace in order to keep up with the expectations that the company has for me, because I can't even keep up with my own expectations. The next pivotal point, I think, that in general you have to look at is when you have transitions in your life, whether it's you have a loved one who is going through an illness, or you just had your first child, or you are buying your first home. Anything that is a big life change in your normal life, you need to also make sure that your career is going to align with it, because it has to move in the same direction. If your career is holding you back from you being greater or bigger, you need to kind of say, okay, I am making these big life changes in my life. Maybe staying at this company for X amount of time until I can feel like I'm ready to transition to my next role is the right move. Or it might be actually just ripping off that Band-Aid and just saying, all these other things in my life are changing and they're for the better. And my career is where I feel very negatively impacted. But maybe it's what pays a lot of the bills. Are there other opportunities or other ways that I can leverage making what my salary is, but doing something that more aligns with, again, my North Star and where I want to go? And then I would say the third one is, and I hear this a lot from people, and I think I mentioned it when we talked a while back, is a big game changer, I think, in a lot of people's lives is they're constantly searching for that salary.
Yeah.
And what they need to actually do is figure out, how do I make this money versus how do I get this money? And it seems like such a strange play on words, but if you're constantly trying to figure out how to get it, you're probably not going to obtain it. But if you figure out a plan on how to make it, whether it's going the entrepreneurial route, maybe it is having a side hustle, maybe it is speaking up to your boss and being like, hey, like, you only gave me a 2% raise last year. I did XYZ and accomplished this. Like, I need to be compensated this amount because that's what the market is saying right now, and getting your voice. But you can't do that until you actually make that plan.
Yeah.
And it can't just be chasing, because if you're chasing it, you're never going to be happy. You're always going to be in that cycle of, I don't ever make enough. What is it that you really need underneath it all to make those transitional steps? And then how do you do it?
I love that. Figuring out what it is you need and making that transition. I think, again, it's that slow down to speed up. You will thank yourself if you can take the time here. I love that reframe of, instead of how can I get the money, how can I make the money? Because one of the things is I want all of us to be a little bit more entrepreneurial minded, maybe not quite, but business oriented in our jobs. One of the things I say to people, if you want a pay rise, you need to make sure that you are delivering more money for the business than it costs to pay you. Otherwise, why are they going to give you a pay rise? What if this, how do you make the money, is actually, how do I make the business enough money that it's a no-brainer to give me a pay rise? I think so many of us, especially, early on in our careers, we're programmers or we're salespeople. Salespeople get it more than others because they've got to deliver. But I think almost every other role, there's not such a clear tie between what we do when we turn up to work and revenue. At the end of the day, the business can only pay you if it results in revenue. So maybe shifting that focus in our day job to how can I make the company money so I can make money is part of that shift to be making. And then your boss is not going to say no. Well, if they do, you leave. Exit stage left.
Yeah, you leave then. But that is so true. And I hear a lot from people, well, I don't do revenue generating work. No, you do.
Everybody does.
Part of the business is a revenue generating, even down to the general G&E functions.
Yeah.
Like finance and HR and operations. Guess what? If you don't put the right strategy, or you don't hire the right people, or you don't balance the books correctly, that's revenue generating, because you are identifying ways to possibly save money, to possibly bring on the right people, or to ensure that you're implementing the right strategy to execute on for that business. But when we get into this mindset, oh, well, I'm not in sales, or I'm not in a part of marketing that's generating leads. You are, though. And you have to figure out how to tell that narrative of what you are currently doing and how it is actually helping the company make that money, as you say.
100%.
Because it's there.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit, just as we wrap up this conversation, what is next for Talent Bill Ventures? It sounds like as a business, you are on a mission to change the world better at the HR end of things. What's next for you?
So I would say what's next for us is building out more of our platform for origami right now, and working with organizations that are really passionate about having the right people in the right positions. There are some products we may look to kind of invigorate and create down the road. But I think right now, this is our main focus. This is what makes us happy. This is our North Star, and where we kind of want to focus our efforts for the next few years to really ensure that, like, we are making a change. Maybe other outplacement companies will say, oh, look what they're doing. That's really different and unique. And even change the model, because if we can even change the model across the board, you don't need to necessarily potentially go with us, even though I would love for all the business to come to us. But if we can change that and make it into a process where people are unfortunately being let go, that it doesn't have to be this completely negative experience, and that we're not so focused on this was my life and this was a part of my life and a part of my journey, then I think we did our job.
Thank you. I love that. Let's move on to the quickfire round. What is the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Stay at a job.
Oh, I think you've kind of answered why in this episode. Okay, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Trust yourself. You are your best advocate. And if you feel a certain way or you have that feeling in your stomach, trust it and know that it's meant for you to change something now.
Yeah, love that. Love that so much. Okay, what is the last book you read and would you recommend it?
I was trying to think about this when I saw those quickfire questions, and I feel like it was a psycho thriller, and I can't even think about what it was called. But I have a feeling I must have liked it because I can remember it had something to do with psycho thrillers, but not a leadership book, unfortunately.
That's all right. I'm a big fan of the fiction. I get that. Actually, and the funny thing is, at the moment I'm listening to books and I couldn't even tell you. I've got a book on the go right now, but I couldn't tell you what it's called. Isn't that hilarious? Like, I listen to it every evening for half an hour. I couldn't tell you what it's called.
During my maternity, I attempted to read books and listen to books. And unfortunately, my mind was just going a mile a minute. And maybe I got 2 words out of the book. I don't know.
Tell us now about mindset. I love giving everybody a mindset tip based on the topic of a podcast episode. So what is your favorite mindset tip for helping women out there right now? Maybe somebody's been let go, somebody who's looking for a career pivot. What is your favorite mindset tip you want to share with us?
Take a second to reflect. Don't go full force on anything at that moment. Take a minute for yourself. Take a minute to think through what you appreciated and what was harming you. And then start to build your action plan of what to do next. Because if you don't do that, like I said earlier, you fall back into that cycle of just feeling stressed, burned out, and unhappy.
Take a moment. I love it. How can people find out more about what you do, both in terms of a business, a leader looking to hire your services, but also anybody looking to get placed with you or anything else? How can people find out more about you and Talent Build Ventures?
Sure. So I do tips and tricks on LinkedIn. For the last month, I have not. I do apologize to my audience for that. But I do give tips and tricks on how to get hired in the industry on LinkedIn. And otherwise, you can follow us at Talent Build Ventures or Origami Outplacement, and we're here to help you.
Thank you very much. And I'll make sure links to all of those are in the show notes. Erica, this has been fabulous having you on. So what would you like to leave the audience with? What is your final thought you'd like to share?
Going into 2025, whether you potentially have been in these rifts that just recently happened with a lot of companies, or you're trying to figure out, what do I want to do in 2025? Take the holiday season to really cherish the moments that you have, not only with family, but cherish the moments you have for yourself and figure out what's going to be the right thing for you to do next, instead of just 2025 starts and your New Year's resolution is to get a new job. Make it purposeful.
I love that. Thank you so much. Make it purposeful. That actually is a beautiful segue to wrap up today's episode, because actually our last episode of the year is going to be airing next week because Team Toni takes holidays. And we're going to be talking next week about using the holidays to build some resilience so you can enter 2025 on a high. And it's really about slowing down to build that resilience. So make sure you join me for that last episode of 2024 ahead of 2025. If you're listening to this in the new year, go check it out. There is never a bad time to deal with building your resilience. I think it is such an important thing to do. But Erica, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been fabulous. I hope more people start building businesses like yours, even though I agree, I kind of want all the business to go your way, but I love trailblazers like you. I really do. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to your next episode also.
Thank you. And listeners, remember, until next time, stay on your tech leadership game and follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.